Hey everyone, welcome back to AI with Pallavi. Ready to learn another AWS service in just 10 minutes? Let's get started. AWS Lambda is a serverless compute option. It's basically function as a service. You just write your code and encapsulate it, put it in the AWS Lambda function, and you should be able to run it very quickly. So, no servers to manage. Your AWS Lambda is going to host your functions in its own environment. So, that's how easy it is. So, let's go ahead and start creating a function. So, let me give my function a name, and I can choose a demo, or you can say demo function, and then I'm choosing a runtime for this particular function. So there are different runtimes available. You can choose in between Node.js, Python, Java, .NET, Ruby, and few others as well. If the runtime which you want to choose is not there, you can use a custom runtime as well. Now you can choose the durable execution features as well, which gives you checkpoint progress within a multi-step environment. In case of AI infrastructures, this feature can be very much useful. Now you can choose the architecture. It can be ARM64 or x86. You can choose any of those architecture for the function. Then permissions. Permission is super critical here because you have to choose the execution role. Now execution role actually tells that what your Lambda function can do. Whether the Lambda function has the ability to get a particular object from S3 or to update an item in DynamoDB, right? So all those permissions has to be added in the execution rule. Once you add it, your Lambda function will be able to execute those operations as well. After this, there are some additional configurations, like you can use the compute type, whether you want to host your Lambda service to actually scale and run the code without any servers management, or you want to manage your servers manually and you would like to use a Lambda managed instances, which is EC2 instances, which can be used to host your Lambda functions, right? There are different options in the networking section as well. First one is function URL. Now, the Lambda functions generally are triggered by a particular service. It can be API gateway, it can be Cognito, it can be CloudWatch, it can be Kinesis, DynamoDB. But let's say you want to invoke this Lambda function via a URL. In that case, you will use function URL. Now there is an option for VPC as well, and please note that this doesn't mean that your Lambda function will be created in VPC. This means that your Lambda function will be able to access resources in a VPC. So you will configure the VPC where your resources are present. Now here by resources I mean it can be another EC2 instance, it can be another database which is present, right? And you want to connect your Lambda function with those particular resources. So in those cases, you can use the VPC option as well. There are other options as well, code signing, encryption, tagging, and others, which are very useful when you're creating the Lambda function. So these are the basic things which you need to provide while creating a Lambda function. Now, once a Lambda function is actually created, it will look something like this. Now you have this environment where your function is there, right? You will be able to see the code as well. Now just remember that the inline editor for this particular Lambda function is present only up to a certain size of code. If the code size exceeded, it's not present there. You generally have to upload it via S3 bucket. So you just upload the deployment package, which consists of all the details, all the resources which are needed by that particular Lambda function to execute, put it on S3, and then it can be used. So that's how Lambda function code encapsulation actually works. Now once this is done, you can see that there are different triggers you can add. So in the trigger configuration, you can choose existing API gateways, load balancers, CloudWatch, IoT, SNS, SQS, multiple services which are present and integrated with Lambda. So yes, this is one service which is actually integrated across different AWS ecosystems. So a must to know, I should say. Now you can define the trigger that comes at the left hand side. So what is actually invoking the function? Let's say when the function is invoked, you can choose the destinations as well. Now the destination means, let's say, on failure or on success. In such conditions, you can create some destination. So as soon as the Lambda result occurs, whether it's a failure or success, the destination type is triggered and the required metadata actually flows there. You should also know that there are different types of invocation within Lambda. It can be asynchronous invocation or it can be event source mapping as well. Now, also the third type is synchronous. So let's say if you're invoking it from API gateway, it will be generally synchronous, because from API gateway you are making the call to the Lambda function. Lambda function is executing, returning the response. It can be asynchronous as well in cases of, let's say, S3. So as soon as an object is uploaded on S3, you want to trigger a Lambda function. So an object is uploaded, S3 bucket is triggered, right? So that would be asynchronous. Lambda maintains a queue for that and will be keep on polling the request from there, right, one by one, and will be processing it. There can be API based call as well, and there also you can define asynchronous or synchronous invocation. There is another type of invocation called event source mapping. Let's say you are dealing with streaming data. You would like to integrate this with DynamoDB streams or Kinesis stream. In those cases, the flow is linear, right? So there might be multiple events occurring at the same time. So you can define the poll based method there, and you can define the event source mapping, and in those cases Lambda will keep on polling those resources, or you can say polling those events, and process them one by one or in batches which you define. So yes, all those features are already present within the Lambda function. You can download the Lambda function code as well. You can have different versions, aliases within the Lambda function as well. Let's say you want to create a new version and then you want to publish it to a particular alias, right? So that's also possible. Now it's very important to look at specific configuration within the function. I would just like to call out the concurrency versions, because there is reserved concurrency, then there is unreserved concurrency and provision concurrency. Consider that across all different Lambda functions, you can execute at a certain level per region, per account. So let's say it's 10,000. You can invoke 10,000 functions at a particular time. That is what concurrency means. At any particular instant, 10,000 execution environments are running simultaneously or concurrently. So that's what concurrency is all about. So you should define the concurrency. Let's say you would like to define that this particular function should always run, right? The concurrency related to other functions should not cause any harm in this particular Lambda function. In that case, you can define a reserved concurrency for that particular function as well. Then there is provision concurrency, which means that at a particular time, the function execution environments will be ready. So by default, it is like when the request comes, execution environment is created. It can be reused as well for different particular requests. Now, in cases, let's say it takes some time to create an execution environment, we can have cold starts. AWS has tried their best to reduce that cold start, but sometimes it still happens. So it depends. Now, let's say you don't want any cold start, you want that the traffic is very high at a particular time of the month or a specific time of the days. So you want to provision some concurrency by default, and you want warm containers. In those cases, you can use provision concurrency. Another events are timeouts that has to be very well configured, memory, ephemeral storage, snap start. So these are few other features which you should know about Lambda functions. And timeout is something which is very critical, because that is the maximum limit your function can execute, right? So ensure that you have set the right timeout. Yeah. You can have VPC configuration set, you can have tags, you can have environment variables as well. Let's say there is certain keywords which has to be reused across your code, so you can mention that as well. Then you also have monitor feature within your Lambda function, where there are by default metrics and logs provided. So you can go ahead, configure that. If your Lambda has a permission, it should be able to push that to CloudWatch as well. So just ensure that execution role has the permissions. Then this is a feature which is very useful, where you can create test events. You don't have to test your functions only after they are live. You can have some sample events ready-made there, and you can just go ahead and test them. And this is how a whole Lambda function is built. It's invoked and it can be tested. And just like that, you have learned another AWS service in 10 minutes. Hit that subscribe button if you like this video, and comment if you have any questions related to this service, or if there is any service you want me to focus next. Happy learning!